Now that we've had a chance to see who is active on the global health stage and how the United States participates in those organizations, let's take a look at what the United States does in terms of the financing of global health activities. Let's look at the financing of development assistance for health internationally. This chart shows the progress in increasing funding for healthcare around the world as part of development assistance. So this is not funding by countries for their own healthcare, but this is aid and assistance to countries to help them improve their healthcare. Almost all of this funding going to lower and middle income countries. You can see a very dramatic scale up since 1990. Figures that went from $5 or $6 billion per year in the early part of this period up to today we estimate somewhere closer to $30 billion per year in development assistance for health. This quantity, DAH, includes both official development assistance, that which comes from governments, but it also includes private and other non-government sources of development assistance. The dark part, that is the bottom part of each of these bars in this chart, that's the money that comes from the United States as a source. The United States currently accounts for about half, about $12 billion out of $25 billion in 2007, the most recent year in this chart. About half of that money came from the United States globally. Where did that money go? Well, from the United States, a lot of it went to non-governmental organizations. And this next chart shows you some of the largest U.S. non-governmental organizations and their level of health spending. You can see that there are a number of U.S. NGOs with spending levels in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and today a number that even have over $1 billion a year of health expenditure. And this is a large part of the $30 billion in annual development assistance for health we see around the world today. These agencies play a wide range of roles. They provide necessary drugs and supplies, they provide food relief, and many of them actually help countries deliver services to rural and urban populations. Now, the U.S. on the global scene looks like a large donor of foreign assistance for health. But if we compare the U.S. with other countries using another indicator shown in this chart, which is the percent of gross domestic product that is given for health assistance outside the United States compared to other countries, we see that the picture looks rather different. U.S. health aid to other countries is less than 0.1% of our national income. This doesn't sound like a very large amount of money compared to our national income, although our national income is very large in total, which is why we account for such a large share of the total aid for health. The U.S. contribution of less than 0.1% of our national income is less than half the level of Norway, a much, much smaller country, which spends almost 0.2% of its gross domestic product on health assistance. Just to give you something to compare this to, it's been recommended by the United Nations that countries should achieve 0.7% of their gross domestic product as total foreign aid. So the U.S. is still, in terms of its total foreign aid, well below that level, and our health aid less than 0.1%. In this next chart, we compare the U.S. spending on global health aid to the federal budget. And you can see that the U.S. spending on global health aid accounted for less than 1% of the federal budget. Now remember, previously we were comparing less than 0.1% to the U.S. GDP. This is as a percentage of the federal budget. And then we can find a very interesting comparison when we compare the actual U.S. spending on total foreign aid, which is shown on the left side of this chart, with what Americans think they are spending on foreign aid. The U.S. total spending as a share of the federal budget on foreign aid overall is about 1% of the total federal budget. Remember earlier I said that less than 1% was spent on health aid. On the right-hand side, when Americans are asked how much the country spends on foreign aid, they answer 27% of the U.S. budget. A huge difference in perceptions. Americans think they are much more generous in terms of their foreign aid budget than they actually are in fact. In this next chart, we compare whether Americans feel that they are spending too much, too little, or about the right amount on efforts to improve health for people in developing nations. These data come from a period over the last 4 or 5 years. As you can see, their opinions fluctuate around more or less, depending on whether you're asking them whether we spend too much or too little or about the right amount. And they tended to converge in the most recent measurement at about a third of Americans holding each opinion. A third thinking we spend too much, a third thinking we spend too little, and a third about the right amount. So probably Americans on the whole feel we are spending about the right amount. The only dilemma we have is that what they think we are spending is a lot more than what we're actually spending. As we've seen, the U.S. is a significant funder of global health activities in middle and lower income countries, and a great deal of this funding goes to address important health problems that cause a large amount of preventable morbidity, mortality, and suffering in the developing world.